There are people who look calm, but inside them entire wars have already been fought. You see them smiling, working, talking normally, living like everyone else. But what you don't see is how many times they had to rebuild themselves from nothing. Some people didn't grow up slowly. They were forced to grow up overnight. They learned silence too early. They learned loss too early. They learned betrayal before they even understood trust. And when a person goes through too much, their psychology changes in ways most people will never understand. They don't think the same. They don't feel the same. They don't react the same. Not because they want to be different, but because life carved something deeper inside them. Today we will understand the psychology of people who have gone through too much and why their strength often looks like distance, coldness, or silence. People who have suffered a lot are often called cold, not expressive enough, too quiet, too controlled. Others say they have no emotions, that nothing touches them, that they don't react the way normal people do. But the truth is very different. They are not emotionless. They are emotionally trained by pain. When a person goes through intense experiences again and again, their mind begins to understand something most people never learn, that reacting freely is not always safe. At first, the reactions are natural. The child cries when something hurts, gets scared when voices get loud, feels broken when love disappears. But when those moments repeat too many times, the brain starts to change the way it responds. This is not weakness. This is survival. Psychologists describe this as emotional regulation through trauma adaptation. When the nervous system is exposed to repeated stress, it stops reacting with the same intensity, because feeling everything at full force would destroy the person. So the mind does something intelligent. It builds control, not to become cold, but to stay alive inside. Imagine a child growing up in a house where shouting always means danger, where loud voices are followed by punishment, or rejection, or fear. That child learns very quickly that showing emotion makes things worse. So they stop crying loudly, they stop arguing, they stop explaining themselves, they become quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they learned that silence keeps them safe. Years later, that same child becomes an adult. People meet them and say, "You're so distant. You never show what you feel. You act like nothing affects you." But what they are really seeing is a nervous system that learned discipline before it learned comfort. When someone has felt extreme pain, their emotions don't disappear. They go deeper. They stop showing everything on the surface, because once showing everything cost them too much. There are people who learned the hard way that when they cried, no one listened. When they trusted, they were betrayed. When they opened their heart, it was used against them. After enough of those experiences, the mind makes a decision without asking permission. Feel less on the outside, control more on the inside. This is why people who have gone through too much often look calm in situations where others panic. It is not because they don't care. It is because they have already felt worse than this before. Their system has been through storms that most people cannot imagine, so small chaos does not shake them the same way. But there is something important that most people misunderstand. Control does not mean absence of feeling. In fact, many of the most emotionally controlled people feel more than everyone else in the room. They notice everything: tone of voice, change in energy, the moment someone becomes distant, the moment something feels wrong. They feel it all. They just don't react to everything anymore, because they learned that reacting to every emotion is how you lose yourself. There was a man who grew up in an environment where he always had to stay strong. He became the one everyone depended on, the one who solved problems, the one who never broke. People admired him. They said he was tough, unshakable. But what they never saw was how early he learned that no one was coming to help him. So he trained himself to stay calm, even when he was hurting. Not because he wanted to be strong, but because he had no other choice. This is the hidden psychology of people who have gone through too much. They don't trust emotions the way others do. They respect them, but they don't let them take control. Because once, their emotions led them into places where they felt powerless. So now they hold themselves differently. They speak less, they observe more, they react slower, they open up carefully, and sometimes the world mistakes this for coldness. But what the world calls cold is often discipline built from pain. It is the strength of someone who knows exactly how much damage uncontrolled emotion can do. It is the silence of someone who learned that not every feeling needs to be shown to be real. And it is the calm of someone who has already survived things that forced their soul to grow up long before their age did. People who have gone through too much do not trust easily. Not because they hate people, not because they want to be distant, but because they have seen how quickly people can change. There is a moment in life when innocence breaks. A moment when a person realizes that not everyone who smiles at you means well, that not everyone who promises to stay will stay, and not everyone who says they love you understands what love really means. For some people, this realization comes slowly. For others, it comes all at once. And when it comes through betrayal, abandonment, or deep disappointment, it leaves a mark that changes the way the mind forms trust forever. Psychology shows that people who experience emotional pain early in life often develop stronger defense mechanisms in relationships, not because they want to build walls, but because their mind learned that openness without safety leads to suffering. So they become careful. They listen more than they speak. They watch how people act, not just what they say. They notice small inconsistencies. They remember how someone treats others, not only how they treat them. To the outside world, this can look like suspicion, like distance, like a lack of warmth. But inside, something else is happening. They are protecting the part of themselves that once trusted too easily and paid the price for it. When someone has been hurt deeply, their heart does not stop wanting connection. It just stops believing that connection is automatic. They no longer assume loyalty. They no longer assume honesty. They no longer assume permanence. Trust becomes something that must be earned slowly, step by step, through time, consistency, and truth. This is why people who have gone through too much often take longer to open up. They don't give their story to everyone. They don't show their weakness to everyone. They don't let everyone see their real thoughts, because once they showed everything to the wrong person, and the memory of that moment stays in the nervous system like a warning. Be careful. Not everyone deserves access to your heart. There was a man who, in his youth, trusted his friends completely. He believed that loyalty was natural, that if you cared for people, they would care for you the same way. But one day, those same friends turned their backs on him when he needed them the most. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. They stopped showing up, stopped answering, stopped standing beside him. And something inside him changed that day. He did not become angry. He did not become loud. He became distant. From that moment on, he kept everyone at arm's length. People who met him later in life thought he was arrogant. They thought he believed he was better than others. They thought he didn't care about anyone. But the few people who stayed long enough to understand him saw something completely different. They saw loyalty that never broke. They saw protection that never failed. They saw a depth of care that most people never reach. Because when someone who has suffered finally trusts you, they do not trust halfway. They trust with their whole soul. They give the kind of loyalty that only comes from knowing what betrayal feels like. They give the kind of love that only comes from knowing what it means to lose someone. This is why their love feels different. It is not loud at first. It is not fast. It is not careless. It is slow, quiet, watchful. But once it is real, it is stronger than anything built on comfort alone. People who have gone through too much do not fall in love with illusions. They fall in love with truth. They don't want perfect words. They want consistent actions. They don't want promises. They want presence. They don't want attention for a moment. They want loyalty over time. And because of this, their relationships are fewer, but deeper. Their circle is smaller, but stronger. Their trust is harder to earn, but almost impossible to break once it is given. When someone has never been hurt, they love with hope. When someone has been hurt too many times, they love with awareness. And awareness changes everything. It removes fantasy. It removes blind belief. It removes the idea that love alone is enough. But it also creates something rare. A kind of connection that is built not on dreams, but on understanding. Not on excitement, but on truth. Not on need, but on choice. When a person who has gone through too much chooses to trust you, it means they saw the risk and stayed anyway. It means they remembered every time they were hurt and still decided to open the door. And that kind of trust is one of the deepest things a human being can give, because it is not given out of innocence. It is given out of strength. Most people are afraid of being alone. Silence makes them uncomfortable. An empty room feels heavy. A quiet night feels like something is missing. They reach for noise, for conversation, for distraction, because being alone forces them to face their own thoughts. But people who have gone through too much experience solitude differently. For them, being alone is not always painful. Sometimes, it is the only place where they ever felt safe. When a person grows up in an environment filled with tension, conflict, unpredictability, or emotional pain, their nervous system learns something very early. Being around the wrong people hurts more than being alone. So instead of fearing solitude, they begin to find peace in it. Not because they don't need others, but because they learn that presence does not always mean comfort, and closeness does not always mean safety. Psychological studies on resilience show that individuals who go through prolonged hardship often develop stronger inner worlds. When the outside world feels unstable, the mind turns inward. They think more, they observe more, they reflect more. They learn to sit with their own thoughts, because there was no one else they could rely on. While others were learning how to depend on people, they were learning how to survive without them. And this changes a person in ways that are not always visible. They become comfortable in silence. They become comfortable with their own company. They become comfortable not explaining themselves to everyone. This is why people who have gone through too much can sit alone for hours without feeling empty. Their mind is not empty. It is full of memories, lessons, questions, and realizations that were built during the times when no one else was there. To the outside world, this can look strange. People may say, "You're too quiet. You should go out more. You need people around you." But what they don't understand is that, for someone who has experienced too much chaos, peace feels unfamiliar at first, and silence feels honest. There was a woman who spent years living in a house where conflict never really stopped. Arguments, tension, misunderstandings, loss, it became normal for her. During those years, she learned not to expect comfort from anyone. She learned not to wait for someone to fix things. She learned not to depend on promises. So she started depending on herself. She learned how to sit alone and think, how to calm herself down without help, how to make decisions without approval. At the time, it felt like loneliness, but slowly, something changed. That loneliness turned into independence. That silence turned into clarity. That isolation turned into strength. Years later, when life became more stable, people noticed something different about her. She didn't chase attention. She didn't try to impress everyone. She didn't feel the need to always be surrounded by people. Some thought she was cold. Some thought she was distant. Some thought she didn't care. But the truth was much simpler. She had already survived the kind of loneliness that teaches you how to stand on your own. When you have lived through moments where no one understood you, no one helped you, and no one stayed, you stop being afraid of being alone, because you already know you can handle it. People who have gone through too much often discover something that others take years to learn. Your peace cannot depend on who stays. Your stability cannot depend on who approves. Your worth cannot depend on who notices you. Once you understand this, solitude stops feeling like rejection. It starts feeling like freedom, freedom from noise, freedom from pretending, freedom from constantly adjusting yourself just to fit into places that never felt right. This is why their silence feels different. It is not empty silence. It is full silence, full of awareness, full of self-understanding, full of lessons that were learned the hard way. They don't need constant conversation to feel alive. They don't need attention to feel valuable. They don't need approval to feel secure, because life already forced them to build those things inside themselves. And once a person learns how to stand alone without breaking, they stop being afraid of losing the crowd. Not because they don't care about people, but because they finally understand something deeper. The wrong company can make you feel more alone than an empty room ever could. And the person who has lived through that truth will never again confuse noise with connection or presence with peace. When someone has been hurt too many times, something inside their mind changes in a very quiet way. They do not announce it. They do not even realize it at first, but their awareness becomes sharper than before. They start noticing things other people miss. The tone behind the words, the hesitation in someone's voice, the forced smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the silence that feels heavier than an argument. It is not that they are trying to judge people. It is that their brain learned through experience that danger rarely arrives loudly. It arrives in small signs, in subtle changes, in moments that feel slightly off, but hard to explain. When a person goes through emotional pain again and again, the nervous system becomes alert to protect itself. Psychology calls this hyper-awareness. It is a common trait in people who have lived through stress, betrayal, or instability. Their mind stays watchful, even when nothing seems wrong on the surface, because once something did seem normal, right before everything fell apart. So now, the brain refuses to be careless. They read people carefully. They listen carefully. They observe carefully. Not because they want to control everything, but because they know what it feels like to be caught off guard. There was a time when they trusted easily, a time when they believed words without looking deeper, a time when they thought honesty was automatic. But experience taught them something different. Sometimes people smile while hiding resentment. Sometimes people promise while planning to leave. Sometimes people say they care, but their actions slowly show the opposite. After living through moments like that, the mind stops looking only at what is said. It starts looking at what is felt. People who have gone through too much can sense tension in a room without anyone speaking. They can feel when someone's energy changes, even if the words stay the same. They can notice when someone is pretending to be okay, because they have pretended to be okay themselves. This awareness is not always comfortable. It means they see things they wish they didn't see. It means they understand situations they wish were simpler. It means they feel the truth even when everyone else is acting like everything is fine. And this is one of the reasons they often stay quiet. Not because they don't understand, not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand too much. They know that reacting to everything only creates more chaos. They know that not every argument leads to clarity. They know that not every truth needs to be spoken at the moment it appears. People who have suffered deeply learn something most people learn very late. Just because you see something does not mean you must fight it. Just because you feel something does not mean you must express it immediately. Just because you know the truth does not mean everyone is ready to hear it. So they choose their reactions carefully. They stay calm when others get loud. They stay silent when others argue. They step back when others rush forward. To some, this looks like weakness. To others, it looks like indifference. But in reality, it is control built from experience. There was a man who, after years of being disappointed by people he trusted, became very observant. In conversations, he spoke less. At gatherings, he watched more than he talked. When conflicts started, he rarely reacted immediately. People thought he didn't care. People thought he was disconnected. But the truth was different. He noticed everything. He noticed who changed their behavior depending on who was in the room. He noticed who only showed kindness when they needed something. He noticed who stayed silent when loyalty was required. He understood more than he said. And because he understood more, he stopped wasting his energy on things that would not change. This is the hidden strength of people who have gone through too much. They do not live blindly anymore. They see patterns. They see motives. They see the difference between words and actions. And once you see those things clearly, you cannot go back to being careless. You become selective with your reactions, selective with your trust, selective with your energy. Not because you want to be distant, but because you learned the cost of giving yourself to the wrong situations. This is why their silence feels different. It is not empty silence. It is aware silence. A silence that is listening. A silence that is watching. A silence that understands more than it shows. They know that not every battle needs a reaction. They know that not every insult deserves a response. They know that not every truth needs to be spoken out loud to be real. And the more life teaches them, the more they realize something powerful. Peace does not come from reacting to everything. Peace comes from knowing what deserves your energy and what does not. People admire strong individuals. They look at them with respect, sometimes even with envy. They say things like, "You're so tough. You handle everything so well. You never break." From the outside, strength looks powerful. It looks like confidence. It looks like control. It looks like a person who cannot be shaken by life. But what most people do not understand is that strength built from suffering is very different from strength built from comfort. The kind of strength people praise the most is often the kind that was never chosen. It was forced. There are people who did not wake up one day and decide to be strong. They woke up in situations where being weak was not an option. When life removes support, when help does not come, when protection never arrives, the mind does something extraordinary. It adapts. Not because it wants to, but because it must. Many strong people were not born strong. They became strong because there was no one else to carry them. They had no one to protect them when they were afraid. No one to guide them when they were lost. No one to stand in front of them when life became too heavy. So they learned to stand in front of themselves. At first, it feels unfair. It feels lonely. It feels like the world expects too much from you too early. But slowly, something changes inside. You stop waiting. You stop hoping someone will come to fix everything. You stop believing that life will suddenly become easier. And in that moment, strength begins to grow. Not loud strength. Not proud strength. Quiet strength. The kind of strength that comes from surviving things you never thought you could survive. There was a young boy who grew up in a place where he had to grow up faster than everyone around him. While others were learning how to dream, he was learning how to endure. He learned to hide his fear because no one listened. He learned to solve problems because no one helped. He learned to stay calm because panic only made things worse. Years later, people admired him. They said he was mature. They said he was strong. They said nothing seemed to affect him. But what they never saw was the child inside him who never had the chance to be weak. This is the truth most people never hear. Strong people often did not want to become strong. They wanted safety. They wanted support. They wanted someone to tell them that they did not have to handle everything alone. But life did not give them that choice, so they became the person who handles everything. And once you learn how to survive on your own, it changes the way you see the world. You stop expecting rescue. You stop expecting fairness. You stop expecting life to always make sense. Not because you became negative, but because experience taught you that survival sometimes depends on accepting reality as it is. People who have gone through too much often carry a kind of strength that feels heavy, because it comes with memories, with scars, with moments they had to face alone. They can stay calm in chaos, but only because they have lived in chaos before. They can handle pressure, but only because they have felt worse. They can keep going when others give up, but only because they learned that stopping was never an option. And this is why their strength does not feel like pride. It feels like responsibility. They know what happens when they fall apart. They know what happens when no one is there to catch them, so they keep standing. Not to prove anything to the world, not to look impressive, not to be admired, but because they know what it costs to collapse. Strong people do not always want to be strong. Sometimes they are tired of understanding everything, tired of handling everything, tired of being the one others depend on. Sometimes they wish they could be careless. Sometimes they wish they could trust without thinking. Sometimes they wish they could fall apart without consequences. But life taught them too early that not everyone gets that luxury, so they carry themselves differently. They move carefully. They speak carefully. They hold themselves together even when they feel like breaking. And the world calls that strength, but deep inside, it is not strength they wanted. It is strength they built because life showed them what happens when they don't. So if you ever meet someone who seems quiet, distant, or hard to read, do not assume they feel less. Sometimes they feel more than everyone else in the room. They just learned that not everyone deserves to see it. People who have gone through too much do not carry loud strength. They carry silent endurance. And the most powerful thing about them is this: they survived things that could have turned them bitter, but instead, they became aware.